get lots of questions about skincare, makeup, sort of been my passion because when I was pregnant with my twins, it was like a very scary pregnancy. And I was on bed rest and I just went down the rabbit hole. That was in 2014. And I started research learning what ingredients meant because I didn't know what anything meant on the back of my products. I was like, what
Yeah.
is all of this stuff?
Everyone
So I
seems
just,
to know
yeah.
a lot more now, yeah. And it's good. It's good and bad, but it's better than the alternative when, in Canada before 1996, there were no ingredients on labels.
What? Wow.
I don't,
Nothing.
I don't know what it is. I don't think it was too dissimilar in the US. I mean, it's really a newer thing, right? Like we just
Yeah.
assumed the government was looking after us, right?
It's so true. And they're not. And especially, I know with like cleaning products, they don't have to list everything.
No, that has
Like,
not changed, and that's really, I have some, yeah, stories. Actually, on one of my podcasts, I talk about that, how it's not on detergent. And I had a patient who was
mhm.
allergic to methyl isothiazolone, and and I said, which detergent? So he called Kirkland, and they wouldn't give him the answer at first, and then finally they relented, and it's in there, it's still in there.
Yeah. And even when stuff comes out and it gets in the news and there's people complaining, like they still don't take it out. That's what's so crazy to me.
Well, I mean, the thing about MI,
Sandy and I are talking about ingredients in detergents and how ingredients do not have to be listed on detergent labels. And she's explaining to me about one of her patients. So I'll let you continue.
well, actually, it's a fun case, and like I do allergic contact dermatitis patch testing, right? So people come in who might be allergic to something that's touching them, and I get some weird stories. I've got some. I need to do a podcast on just all the weird cases I've seen. Like you would be surprised at the crazy stuff. But this guy came in and said he was allergic to his ski socks, and I said, okay. And I always try to believe the patient, and he was allergic to the detergent that was sort of stuck in the ski socks are thick. And where are you in the U.S.?
Houston.
Houston. Okay, so maybe you don't ski, but ski socks
We
are really
actually, I do ski, and most of them are wool, right? Or they're like a wool poly
thick.
blend.
They're
Yeah.
thick. And so they would often like they will hold the detergent. So when he
Mm.
skied, the pressure would leach out this preservative called methyl isothiazolone, and he had blisters. He had like blisters along the lines. After you ski, you get these lines from
Yes.
pressure.
Those indentions. Yeah.
And I asked him what his detergent was. It was Kirkland brand, and because what we were just discussing is the ingredients were not on the label. Like they put a few things. They put a few things to make it sell, like phosphate free or whatever, which makes no difference from with respect to allergy anyway. And he called and called and called, and finally they said yes, methyl isothiazolone, the preservative he was allergic to, was in the detergent. And I checked actually before I did my podcast, and we talked about this case, and it's still in there. So the thing about MI is we short form. Now you know a little bit about MI, right?
Right.
So it is a preservative. Little history about MI, which is really interesting, is there are two preservatives. There's actually three preservatives in that class: methyl isothiazolone, methylchloral, and then benzoisothiazolone, which sometimes is in pools and actually was in Tide, but they took it out. They took it out. So and if it's used in a certain percentage, because we have to preserve things, and
Right.
if it's used in a certain percentage, it's actually quite safe. It doesn't elicit allergic reactions. It's not carcinogenic. It's not irritating. But when the pressure, so it used to be used in this 3-to-1 combination of three parts methylchloral isothiazolone and 1 part methyl isothiazolone, and we used the trade name for that was Cathon. So we'd see people allergic to it periodically, but because the percentages were low of the MI is more allergenic, we didn't see a lot of people allergic. And then what happened is, as the public opinion of parabens, and we can talk about parabens next if you want,
Sure.
started to be very problematic, and companies were pressured to take it out of their products. They needed another preservative, so they just didn't have a lot of options. So they started to use methyl isothiazolone alone, and when they used it alone, they used it in higher percentages. And then we had like an epidemic. Now within my community, I mean, it's thousands of people, but in the grand scheme, it's not millions. But it was very devastating to a lot of people. It ruined their lives because they didn't know what they were
Mm.
reacting to. They were reacting to their detergent or their shampoo. This preservative
Wow.
is often used in wash-off products. So now the
And it's
legislature.
in, and just from my perspective of reading labels all the time, I see it all the time. I mean, it's still everywhere. So it's,
Well, if you're not allergic, it's not a problem. If
okay.
you're allergic, it's a problem. So what we did in Canada and in Europe is the percentage. See, a lot of this, and I'm sure you get comments from other people on Instagram and stuff like that. Like the percentage is important. Also with fragrance, a percentage of anything is important because that will elicit either an allergic or an irritant reaction. So in Canada, we restricted the percentage so that it won't elicit an allergic reaction, because that was the whole problem. It wasn't problematic until they started to use higher concentrations. So I don't think, in fact, actually, I know that it's not restricted in the US.
What do you
So
think about, though, if you have it in a smaller percentage in a bunch of different products? And I think this, could that become problematic?
cumulative effect. I
Yeah.
don't think that anybody really knows that answer, but if you understand how the skin works, um, it shouldn't be an issue, like the skin's immune system. It is potential. You're right. Like if you use 4 products that all contain MI, there's a cumulative effect of exposure effect. So it is possible. Listen, I think, the because of all the public pressure, which is great, and we're sort of looking more at what we eat, what we put in our bodies, what we put on our skin, what we wash our hair with, our clothes. Um, you know, we need young, bright minds to come up with novel ways of preserving things. Like we can use bacterial cultures. We can mess with the pH of the product. Like we can do other things, but it
Right.
takes more money, time, research. Why can't we just throw something cheap in there that works? Like we know it's okay. So 2% of the population are going to have a rash. Too bad, right? Or it goes down the drain and affects the environment. Too bad. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what were the symptoms that people were experiencing with MI in
When we
particular?
had the epidemics, like we would see people come in, like you have to understand, so this is my area of subspecialty, right? So I would have tertiary care means like hospital level care. So we would see people
Okay.
really bad. They would be head to toe covered in dermatitis and on prednisone constantly
Oh,
as soon as they stopped. And they didn't know it was their shampoo.
their shampoo
It was the methyl isothiazolone on their shampoo.
and the shampoo.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is one thing I want to talk about your book, but it relates to what we're talking about, how it's an allergen. What is an irritant and what is an allergen? Can you explain that for everybody?
Sure. So I kind of use examples or analogies of things, which I think sort of hit home the point. Most people in North America, and actually when I have in my clinic people from Europe, sometimes they don't know what I'm talking about. Poison ivy. Okay.
Okay.
Most people would know what poison ivy is. So poison ivy is a plant. And if you're allergic, because not everybody is, very low percentage. Allergy is actually not common, but when it's present, it can be very devastating and often just hard to figure out. So if you're allergic to poison ivy and you touch it and it's actually the resin on the plant, you will get a contact dermatitis, a red, itchy, scaly, sometimes oozy rash that lasts, untreated, it will last 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a finite amount of time. If you treat it, it will go away faster. You treat it with a steroid.
But it'll run its course if you let poison ivy go.
Yes, if you're not continually touching it,
Okay.
that's the key, right? With
Okay.
personal care products, people don't know they're doing it, so they keep. Yeah. Now,
Got it.
so that's it. Now, if you eat poison ivy, you're fine because the allergies that are internal, like so, if you eat a peanut, you get hives, you get anaphylaxis, swollen lips, you can die. That's a type 1 allergic reaction. You can actually put a peanut on your skin, not have a rash. So they're different. They're different. So an allergy is your body's immune system seeing a chemical and attacking it, thinking it's a bad organism. That's what allergy is driven from. Is our immune system is misfiring. They think they're attacking it like an enemy. So irritation is different. So this is the example I use for irritation. You take 20 people and you expose them to poison ivy, and maybe only one person gets a rash because their immune system sees it as foreign and they react against it. You take those same 20 people and tell them to wash their hands 100 times with a detergent and water. They all get a rash. So irritation is not specific for the immune system. It's not a it's not seeing one chemical and reacting. It is caustic, or it's alkaline or acidic, or like water and detergent break down our natural skin barriers, remove natural oils. So irritation causes in all comers potential reaction if it's used in high enough quantity. So exposure is important. You only need a little drop of poison ivy to get a big rash. You need to wash your hands 100 times to get a rash. Now, the thing with personal care products and why irritation has become such a problem, and I extend irritation is the medical term for sensitive skin, like really.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Got it.
Skin's a marketing term. That's
And
not
so just going back to allergic reactions real quick. So that is immune system specific for specific people. So something, and so it has nothing to do with, it's not common amongst everyone.
no.
But there's certain allergenic ingredients that do affect more people than others, like MI.
Yeah, so certain
Okay.
chemicals are more prone to cause allergy. Many aren't. But when they are, concentration matters, exposure matters. And the other common misconception with allergy is you have to use it many, many times before you get a reaction.
That was going to be my question. How do you know and how do you get an allergy?
Well, again, if you think that it's your immune system recognizing something as like a bad organism, that's what all of our inflammation that we have in medicine, asthma, eczema, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, it's our immune system fighting ourselves. So it's confused. It's basically our immune system is there to protect us from organisms and cancers, and so it's misfiring. The bigger question is why. That's some of my book is like we've overcleaned. Our immune system trains our body. We need our good bacteria. We can have a little discussion about that, and that's a bit more controversial. Hygiene hypothesis, but
Yeah.
yeah, allergy is not common, but when it happens, it can be extremely problematic. Irritation is about 80% of the reactions that people get from personal care products. And most of irritation is cumulative. And that's why we saw such a rise in it in the sort of 2000s, right? Because of poly product use. Like when I graduated, I'm like a dinosaur now. I mean, there was no Botox. So people like are using 10 steps. And then all of a sudden we start getting these barrage of people coming in with sensitive skin and say, I can't use anything. And we're like, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah, it's like everybody has sensitive skin. I mean, I've been saying that for years, like I'm so sensitive no matter what. Like there's very few products that I can use that will cause no reaction in my skin. And
A lot of it's self-induced because we poly product, and a lot of it is bad products.
bad
Like
products.
and I say bad in quotation marks. Like, I mean, you really only need at the most 10 to 12 ingredients to make a product function, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yep.
When there's 50, there's 60. Hair care has got tons. Hair care is a big problem, and I think people are starting to recognize now. It's like a lot of times all I have to do with somebody with sensitive skin is they've already changed all their products. As long as we can have the natural, because sometimes naturals can be irritating as well, like essential oils, but they forget about the hair.
Yeah. I thought this was so interesting in your book when you talked about the hair. I
Your
think it's
hair
going to
goes
be
through
helpful
your
for
face.
people.
Yeah. So number one cause, hair care is the number one cause of new onset eyelid rash.
Of eyelid rash, the number one. Wow. And that's the last thing that people would think.
That's right. And so, because they've already, changed their cleansers, stopped their eye creams, done all that stuff. And I go, well, you're using, a Veda shampoo. It's like you smell it from across the room. And
Yep. And so you think in that case, do you think a lot of this is from the fragrances, or you think it's everything?
the number one cause of new onset allergic contact dermatitis in patients without eczema, like they don't have a history of eczema, are fragrances. Now, and fragrances are very complex, like there's natural derived fragrances, synthetic ones. And again, contrary to popular belief, the natural ones are just as problematic as the synthetics. And when I have a patient come in, and I know that your name of your switch natural, there's a lot of great things about natural products. There's a lot of great things about synthetic products. You can't take them as you have to look at each ingredient at its face value, because some synthetic ones are great, some natural ones are awful, and vice versa.
Yes,
You
I
know,
agree. Yes, it's so I'm so glad you're bringing this up because I had this experience and I've had other people tell me, well, they think that I'm using a all natural product or a product that's marketed as clean. Why am I still breaking out? And the truth is, I have been just as much likely to break out or have a reaction from a natural and a conventional product.
hmm
Even though the natural might not have toxins in it, I think that like essential oils can be very potent and can
they
have
they
effects.
are.
So it's very difficult for me to recommend skincare because everybody reacts to things so differently.
So that's why in my book I talk about this product elimination. I mean, you go down to very basic, and when I say basic, that's often not natural. It's just ingredients that are really boring, products that are really boring, and then you have to. It's trial and error, because if it's not a true allergy to an ingredient, it's a cumulative. So and the other thing is, it's not often one product. It's not the first product, the second product, or the third. It's the fourth interacting with the other three. Right? So that's where it gets
Right.
a bit complicated. That's why the product you eliminate and you reintroduce. I wanted to touch on something you said about toxin. And
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with this term. Because if you look in the dictionary, I mean, a toxin is actually a poison from a plant or an animal. And that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking. So it's again, it's a bit of an urban term, right? When
Yeah.
I think about toxins in beauty, I think about things that can be hormone disruptive, things that have questionable cancer rankings, right? Like
Right.
formaldehyde. And I think about what it does when it goes down the drain. It goes into the environment. Is it going to be caught by the treatment, plants? Sometimes they're not, right?
Mhm.
And that's very different than what you're putting on your skin. Okay, so I think a lot of, I mean, in Canada anyway, and Europe, the cancer causing and the hormone disrupting ingredients, they're quite regulated. And there are new ones always emerging, and there's other things that we need. There's always, it's constantly evolving. But when people equate natural with toxin, it's like what's good for your skin isn't the same as what's good for the environment, right? Like poison
Yeah.
ivy is natural, arsenic's natural. Okay, so like if they go out into the environment, they're not going to harm the environment, but they're not good for your skin. So
Right. And it's almost like we're lacking the right, we don't have the words, I guess, the
mhm.
specifically the right words to describe what we're talking about. And I kind of think of these as two separate issues, which is why I'm so glad that you're talking about this because I think it all gets jumbled together. So
Mhm.
in my mind, and what I try to educate people on is avoiding the endocrine disruptors, avoiding the ingredients, the products that have ingredients that have carcinogenic byproducts that are making their way into our water and
Yes.
things like that. And then you have someone who's trying to get a skincare regimen that makes their skin feel good and look good, and they're running into all these problems, even though they're avoiding
hmm
all of these quote unquote toxins.
hmm Yeah, and I think that even the to extend on that, we did a whole episode on sustainability. I mean, there's not just the what we're putting on our skin, what we're putting out in the environment, but like all the plastic bottles and the thousands or millions of acres that of farmland that you need to grow all these ingredients, in particular palm or coconut or soy, and so it's truly I also look at sustainability now when it comes to products,
Yeah.
and can we recycle? Like caps and things are very hard to recycle. Plastic. I mean, the amount of plastic that the cosmetic industry produces every year is mind-boggling, and
And the sheer number of products that are on the market.
you know, I,
In fact, I shared today that I think that I love skincare and I love cosmetics and products and I just enjoy it, but so much of it is just a scam and a waste.
Well, so this is the other thing that I often say, and I've said it in my book, and I say it: skin care and beauty it's not a branch of medicine, right? It's a business. It's a commodity, and so and often it has very little to do with your skin health. Beauty, I mean, I love beauty too. I love color my hair, makeup on, I do stuff. I love it. It's self-care. That's not healthcare. Self-care is not healthcare. So, and there's nothing wrong with it. But when you have a problem, what happens is you're not really helped by this industry because it's there to, oh, she's got a problem, we can sell her more products. Because
Yes.
the most common thing that people do when they have a rash or they have an issue, they go get more product.
So true.
And actually, what I say in my book, no, dial it back. Like, no, you're
Yes,
going
tell us about the product elimination diet. So helpful.
So how it all started was, I mean, I live and work in Canada, right? So healthcare is slightly different, and we have, my subspecialty dermatology is very underserviced, and then my subspecialty, which is allergic contact dermatitis, is like there's only like 15 of us in Canada that do it. So, in order, like I would see somebody, they'd be having problems, like these people with these MI, like they have rashes everywhere, they come from far away, and I'd be like, okay, the four most common things in personal care products that cause allergic contact dermatitis are fragrance, essential oil, plant-based fragrance, formaldehyde releasers, MI. So I'm going to make a list of products that don't have them. This was really self-serving for myself because I couldn't test them imminently. They had to wait. So I'd say, listen, just do this. You got like a 80% chance this is going to fix you in the short term.
Like, give them
And
something to get started.
yes, and you know what happened is almost 100% would get better because that's the most common reason for them to have allergic reactions from their skincare products or the personal care, because I also include hair care there and detergent. And so they'd
Yeah.
come back and they'd be like, this thing really helped me. Although I really hate these products. Like they're gross. Like they're, like Cetaphil, CeraVe, all the boring stuff. And then you'd get some people like, this is toxic sludge, right? And stuff like that. I go, listen, this is the short period of time, just so we can control it. I'll test you. We'll find out what you're reacting to. And then what happened, so there was a sort of an epidemic in the early 90s and early 2000s, is a lot of people were negative.
They weren't
So
allergic to anything, so you're like, wait.
it's irritant.
Yeah.
So you're using 20 products, okay? Many of them have 50 ingredients. So if you do, what's 20 times 50, right? That's how many ingredients you're putting on your face. And you want me to tell you which one is okay, so you got to eliminate everything. You're going to use these 5 things. They're really boring. They have no fragrance, no plants, no essential oil, like all this stuff I just said. And then you reintroduce your products one at a time in the order that you miss. And most commonly, people will come back and say, these shampoos, because the shampoos are gross, right? They have no scent, they don't lather, they're not so nice, but they
It
don't.
feels totally, yeah, so different than what
And
people
so
are used
then,
to.
exactly. And then they would introduce and they go, well, as soon as I brought back my blah, blah, blah shampoo from the salon, my eyelids went crazy. So, but then they'd have a plan, right? They would say, okay, that one, I keep everything the same. I tried this one, bad reaction. So I'm going to try again. So it's a bit empowering. And it also keeps them out of the derm office because, we don't really have the people power to deal with these cosmetic, reactions, right? Because they're
Yeah,
using lots of products.
right.
So that's how it all came about, and it's been very helpful for a lot of
Makes a
people.
lot of sense because you can pinpoint exactly what's causing the problem. I think that's, yeah, that's a great advice. Going back to dermatology versus cosmetics, I am curious, how did you decide to go to medical school and become a dermatologist?
Wow. When I think about it today, because I've mentored a lot of young people, which I really enjoy, I don't think I would have, you have to be so singular now, right out of high school, right? I was an athlete. I was a volleyball player. I just wanted to play volleyball. I actually was going to go to the US, to Duke. And I ended up staying in Toronto. I played volleyball for Toronto, and I did my Bachelor of Science degree. And I just always liked science. And then when I realized I wasn't going to, be a professional volleyball player, I said, I'll apply to medical school. And then when I was in medical school, it was just a fluke again. I did my undergraduate degree in immunology. And the skin is
Okay.
really its own immune system. So I happened to do a dermatology elective and again, I'm dating myself. This is before Botox, okay? And there was no cosmetic enticement to be a dermatologist. I just liked it because
I
it
see.
was, there was dermatology, you could do surgery. I liked surgery. There was a good life-work balance to be a mother. I have three sons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, so I graduated in 1997, and I think lasers were just starting. Botox had just sort of started, maybe
Hmm.
a few years, and that wasn't taught in residency programs. Listen, I actually enjoy the cosmetic aspect. I do cosmetics as well. I actually think it's wonderful to empower women and make them feel, better about themselves. But I think it's a challenge for our specialty because it's more remunerative. So we have trouble, with the balance of derms doing enough general dermatology as well as cosmetic dermatology. So,
Right.
all the overboard stuff like too much filler, too much Botox, too much.
Definitely too much. You said, you mentioned that it was a good work-life balance, being a mom.
I have three sons, yeah.
And I think that an important topic and advice people would want to know is what should parents be using on young children? Because you want to start them off right, and you kind of hear people get started off with eczema or some sort of skin condition on their babies, and then they can't escape it.
Yeah. So again, this is where I think less is more approach is very helpful. And if I could digress a bit, some of the book which you've read, some of my book which you've read, is about how maybe as a society we are a bit too clean. And I'd like to just make like a scientific statement about the difference between being clean and being hygienic, because they're actually quite different. So to be hygienic really is to wash your hands, right? Most of our disease that is spread, like infectious disease, is spread through touching, through our hands, touching our face, touching. Remember when COVID, people touched their face 100 times. Like people have no idea, right? And of course, in the kitchen, you're cutting chicken, whatever, all that that's hygiene of food. And go to the bathroom, you wash your hands. Obviously, if you have an occupation where you're outside construction and you're dirty, you wash, right? But most of the modern day cleaning that we do in the shower every day, scrubbing our head to toe, has actually almost nothing to do with hygiene. It's got to do with societal norms. It is the societal norm to not smell, to have clean hair, to be presentable. And I'm not saying like don't, like, this is a problem. Like when I first go on talk shows and something, they're like, oh, so you don't shower, you don't bath, right? You're not understanding the difference. I'm trying to talk about it from a science point of view. Of course I do, but I don't, when I go into the shower, I don't actually use a lot of soap. I don't use soap. I don't use a lot of cleanser unless I play tennis or whatever, and I wash my bits. So going back to the kids, when if you look at and I did a lot of research for my book, the history of hygiene is sort of boring for the most part, but it's fascinating when you think before 1940 there were no indoor showers, indoor plumbing, right? And there were no antibiotics. So if little Joey got a cut, he could die. Okay, so the
Yeah.
kid goes into the bath, the mom's scrubbing behind the ears, right? The commercials where
Yes. It's
so
like my
this
grandmother used to scrub me in the bath as a
right,
kid.
ingrained. It's
Yes.
ingrained in us. Nobody's dying from a cut today, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the most important thing you can do for your kids is to not over clean them, not overwash them. A little dirt is good. The whole microbiome thing. They talked about a cup of dirt. You want to make sure your kids eat a cup of dirt before they're 12 or whatever. Like so,
I
because
haven't heard that. I've kind of, you want to eat a cup of dirt.
I don't know what the saying is, but
That's
the
so
point is,
funny.
if we're too clean. So let's talk about why being too clean is a problem. So
Great.
when
Yes.
you are, I love this analogy, and I used it in my book. Our immune system is like a computer, right? It has all the hardware, but no data, right? So we got lymph nodes, we got cells, we got stuff, we got channels, we got all everything, but no data. How does your immune system know what's good and bad? It has to be taught. So when you're born, when you come out of the birth canal, you get descended upon by trillions of bacteria on your skin and in your gut. And your immune system goes, okay, this stuff's cool. This stuff's good. Okay, we like this stuff. This is good. So that when it sees something that isn't part of your mom's skin or wasn't part of her vagina and it didn't colonize you, your immune system goes, okay, this is bad, the danger, right? Pathogen. If you don't give it bacteria, it's not going to train itself. So we went from showering and bathing once a week, maybe in 1940. Most of that was sponge bathing, and maybe you washed your hair, you go to a bathhouse or whatever. I was just in Japan, they have all these bathhouses. It's fascinating culture. To washing every day. And that's, what is that? Less than 100 years.
Yeah,
So
and a lot of people are probably washing twice a day.
yeah, our immune system hasn't had a chance to really catch up to that, right? And there's lots of studies showing, there was this whole controversy about C-sections versus vaginal birth. Would the immune system be less robust? All that data is still kind of not clear. The point is, we have done something. I mean, there were immune diseases prior to 1940, but the amount of them has increased. And so if our immune system is sort of messed up and misfiring because it hasn't been trained as a child.
And so the immune system, can you talk about the relationship, like the immune system and our skin microbiome? And are we messing up our skin microbiome? And is that what's causing our immune system to go haywire?
I think most of the research, and I haven't kept up on as much of it because I did look at the immunology and the microbiology and the microbiome bacteriology for my book, and probably in 6 years it's even advanced more. But your immune system is pretty much fully developed as an adult. So the critical time is in childhood, especially in the first 2 years of life. So.
So it is so important to not overwash babies. That's the big
They're
takeaway.
not freaking dirty. What are you washing them for? Like, what are you washing them for? You know,
Right.
now bathing is very soothing, right? Like I used it as a way to get my kids to sleep and all that. So, I mean, and then if they have skin disease, if they have atopic eczema, it is shown that bathing every day is actually helpful because for other reasons. But
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yeah, we can circle back to that. But the point is it's just to be cognizant of it. Like, again, I use that example of, the kid in the bath and then the mom's scrubbing behind his ears. Like, we don't need to do that anymore. But to get back to so we have an immune system in the skin, which is connected to our internal immune system, but it is somewhat separate. And again, I go back to that analogy of it has to be taught what is right or what is good bacteria and what is bad bacteria. And that happens really in the first year of life.
And so what about as adults, what are some hygiene tips that you would give?
Well, I mean, if you have, okay, I have some girlfriends, I'm going to digress here for a second. They're like, Sandy, I loved your book. Saying, I don't have any issues with my skin. I can use whatever I want. I can use 100 products. I can use spray perfume. I can do this. I can do that. I go, great. But what happens when you have a problem? Okay. When you have a problem, you go get more product, right? And you go see the dermatologist and you're like, what am I reacting to? So if you have skin disease, like if you have atopic eczema, psoriasis, you have rosacea, seborrheic dermatitis, a less is more approach. Use cleansers that are pH balanced. Don't poly product. You have fragrance free in your detergent, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff I sort of talk about in my book.
Yeah.
And if you want to decrease your risk of having a problem, then follow those kinds of rules. If you are very concerned about what you're putting on your skin, then the natural way is better. But if you have the knee-jerk response by most of my patients is when they have a rash or they have a problem, they go natural. And that isn't always, well, almost never it's the answer, because it's not, toxins aren't giving you rashes. Toxins, again, are about hormone disruptive, cancer causing, hurting the environment. So
Yeah.
there's a dichotomy there of understanding that I have a rash, I don't want to use toxins, I'm going to go natural. Nope, wrong.
Right. Okay. That makes so much sense. It's two completely separate issues.
Yeah.
What are the big problems that you see coming up with natural products? Like, what should somebody look for experiencing skin problems that a lot of natural products have?
Well, the most common, we go back again, the most common cause of both allergic and irritant reactions in the skin, in particular on the face, is fragrance, both synthetic and natural, and I would say essential oils are up there. So essential oils are, let's actually talk about an essential oil. Essential oil, I always find this interesting too when people look at me and go, what is she talking about? Lavender is not one chemical. And if you surveyed, 10 people on the side of the street, they go, lavender's one thing, right? One chemical. No. If you suck out the contents of a plant, do you think that's going to be one chemical structure? It's usually 50 or more. So inside some of those essential oils are hidden individual ingredients that are problematic. In particular, fragrant terpenes like linalool, limonene, citronella,
Those are
geranol.
the ones that we see on labels because their companies are required now to list out those allergens that are components of the essential oils on the product labels, right?
Very good. Yes, but
Yep.
not in the US.
Until Mocha, I think, well, you're right. Not in the US now, but we had that.
You have
Um,
MOCA, or the Modernization Act, but it's at this stage, the Modernization Act, as far as I've read it, is just mandating companies to tell the government where they actually make their products,
yeah, there's not much in there.
where that they're safe.
Yeah, there, unfortunately, we were expecting a lot more, I think.
California has this 65, whatever it is, the
Prop 65, yeah.
yeah, they're a little bit more advanced on these things, but here's the thing though. If you have, so, and let's digress, where that started was the European Union. And I would say the European Union is the most regulated anywhere, maybe outside of Japan, for personal care products. And so we look to them. But if you're a multinational company like L'Oreal and you want to sell in Europe, you have to follow their guidelines.
Right.
So by default, some of these bigger companies that
We're
sell in
doing
Europe,
it already. Yeah.
but where you don't see it is in the mom and pop shops. So and most of the I wouldn't say most, many of the reactions that I see in patients are often from smaller companies in the US that aren't aware of these things. Like they're cosmetic chemists should be, but they don't have to put it on the label, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think there is a misconception that essential oils are non-problematic.
No, no,
And
they're
it couldn't
actually
be farther from the truth. I think they're so potent and powerful. I mean, I
really potent.
personally seek out products that don't have them because I've
Well,
experienced some issues with
again,
certain essential oils.
yeah, what have you had problems with? Which
So
one?
I noticed over time, it's funny you mentioned lavender. I actually really like the smell of lavender. And so when I would choose a body cream or something, I would go for the lavender. And I started to notice that my skin felt itchy when I would use it. And
Mhm.
it took me a while to figure out it was the lavender, but once I switched the scent or just went to unscented, it went away. And so
Yeah.
I figured it was the lavender.
So lavender is one of the more problematic ones with respect to ingredients. So they have fragrant terpenes, linalool, limonene, which are allergenic when they're oxidized. And then been some recent studies showing they contain several chemicals that can be hormone disruptive, right? Both tree tea oil and lavender there were some anecdotal case reports of
Yeah, I saw
waste.
that. And it hasn't really been substantiated, but that was really interesting. And,
Well,
lavender's in so many of those it's supposed to be calming and help you sleep. And I get all of that. But at the same time, I want my skin to feel
well,
good.
it is. And again, like I go back to my friends to say, I don't have any issues. I can do whatever I want. Fine, but don't do it with your kids. Like kids don't need freaking lavender. Sorry, my French here. To
Yeah, no,
to sleep.
absolutely.
Right? Read to them,
Right.
keep them on, whatever. Like they don't need a diffuser with lavender. I actually want to talk about diffusers but and they're
Yeah.
also breathing it in, right?
Yeah.
They're
Right.
breathing in. Like there's people go, I don't want chemicals. I go, well, do you drink water? It's H2O2. That's a chemical. It's all chemicals, right? So you have to again, we're in an age of too much information. Like you can't just say that. Like you want a chemical that isn't problematic. It's not cancer causing, not hormone
Right.
disruptive, not going to hurt the environment. And
Tell me about diffusers.
so we started to see an epidemic of diffusers. I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or something. If you look at the essential oil industry, um, it is just like the graph of sales is just skyrocketed, right?
Mm.
And it's $1 billion industry now. And I want to come back to this, but the EU is going to start regulating it, and it's really going to change the game.
Regulating essential oils?
Yeah,
Or, okay.
so we'll come back to that. So I had this. My first encounter was I had a lady come in. I often see people from far away, and she showed me these pictures, and she had like massive swelling on her eyelids. And I'm like, well, that's pretty bad. Like, and then she goes, and I say, well, how often does it happen? She goes, it only happens like once every couple months. I go, I cannot figure it
Mm.
out. Anyway, I allergy test her, and she comes up to ylang ylang, which is the base fragrance of Aveda, and eucalyptus, I think it was. And I said, do you use stuff? She goes, nope, don't use. I use Cetaphil. I use this. I use La Roche-Posay. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, do you use essential oil? Do you work with them? Do you have kids that use them? And she said, well, I have a diffuser. And then she showed me a picture. She sent me a picture actually after I wrote an article. Actually, her case was in Reader's Digest.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it has a wall like of two shelves with like 40 different essential oils. So depending on her mood or what she's feeling or whatever, she'll put a little essential oil into the diffuser. So that's why it was random, because she wouldn't use
She was
ylang ylang.
changing them up. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
I can
So
remember when diffusers were all the rage, and I got so many questions about them. It's just not something I'm weird about putting things in the air in my home, and so I never got into it. But I know that people really love their diffusers, and maybe you can speak to this too. Like people are not using them the way they're intended to be used. They're using them for hours. People are using them in daycares all day. I mean,
yeah, it's so bad, and I mean, I don't know a lot about her brand, and I think sometimes her language, I'm talking about Jessica Elba, her brand.
okay.
But a whole bunch of people sent me, she was on a stage somewhere talking about something, and she said, do you know what the most toxic thing in your home is? She said, fragrance. So, and people don't always equate an essential oil with fragrance, but what the heck? It's scented. Where do you think the vast majority of fragrances come from? Plants, flowers. They can be copied through called headspace analysis, where you take the chemical structure of the scent and you can copy it, make a synthetic variety. But the
Oh, I'm
vast
so glad
majority,
you mentioned that because I think I get this comment all the time from companies that our fragrance is proprietary. And I just think that's a complete,
okay,
um,
so the issue there is, and I get that because, what makes Chanel smell like Chanel or Pantene smell like Pantene?
but if we can copy it, then why does it matter?
Well, what's more important, and again, this is what the EU has done, is so for the listeners out there, when you see fragrance on a label, that is a placeholder ingredient. We don't actually know what's in the fragrance. You just said there might be 30 ingredients to make Pantene smell like Pantene. So inside those 30, if the company is using fragrance molecules that have been identified as problematic allergenic, which the EU has done, they did the original 26 in 1996. Now they have another 82, and they're going to add another, I think, 120, which are mostly essential oils. If you use them in your fragrance proprietary scent, you have to put them on the label, and that's what you were talking about. So, and that's why we see them. We see them at the end of the list, and in some of the more natural products, you'll see double asterisks, linalool, naturally derived,
Yeah.
rather than synthetically derived. So, again, if you don't have a problem with the fragrance, it's not an issue. But if you do, you can't. Before this, you couldn't really find what you were allergic to. So, anyway. Yeah, it's so complex, but I love it, and I love educating because so many people just don't understand. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time I mean, you're a dermatologist and you've taken the time to devote so much to education. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is when and how did you decide to write your book?
Well, part of it was under sheer frustration, especially with the MI epidemic and people, because there's so few of us that allergy test. And I just felt like I couldn't educate enough people, and I couldn't see everybody. And I just felt that there was a need. And I actually went on this incredible trip. And when I was there at the end of the trip, well, I wrote about it in my book. It was the North Pole. I went to this North. And I was going through some life changes, and we were sitting around at the end of we did this amazing expedition, and we were sort of saying, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? What do you want to do? What's something that scares you? You know, these kinds of discussions that you have. And I said, you know what? I'd really like to write a book. I'm so frustrated. I want to write a book and educate the public, but I can't. I'm not. My kids laugh. I'm not a great writer. I'm actually a great writer. I don't have great sentence structure or grammar, but I don't know how. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to go. And this guy sitting beside me said, "Oh, hi, I have a great, connection for you. He's a ghostwriter, he's a science writer," and that's how it happened.
Oh, that's
I met
so
him.
neat.
Yeah, I met him and I told him my idea, and he was like, "This is a great idea." And we wrote a book proposal, and I got 3 offers.
That's amazing.
So
And
I
the
really
book's
like
been out since 2016, right?
2018.
2018.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I thought, my editor called me, was it last year, wondering if we should do a second edition, and I said, the
Oh.
information is still very relevant. I don't think really a lot has changed. Some legislation like the Modernization Act in the U.S., some of the stuff. Oh, and the EU is going to start regulating essential oils.
Right. And when I mentioned your book because we read it in my book club and I posted about it and several people immediately responded, "Oh, I love that book. You should definitely, I'm excited you're reading it. There's so much to learn." And it is interesting how little has changed since 2018. You mentioned regulations. Can we go back to that a little bit? I just want to get like your overall take on the regulations. Like, what are they getting wrong and what could they do better?
So there's so much to regulate. I mean, like, I don't know how. Well, the U.S. I mean, I don't want to speak ill of. The problem in the U.S. is the Food and Drug Act was put down pen to paper in 1938, and it left the governance of skincare. Like, if you think about what they had in 1938, they had like Ivory soap and a few creams, right?
Yeah, there wasn't much to regulate, I guess.
But they left the regulation to the companies. And it was never changed until 2023 because of lobby groups, because they blocked it, right? Like, big companies have a lot of money and they didn't want to be told what to do. And finally there is it's not, the big companies are actually pretty good. Like, they listen and they take our advice. Like Tide, we said, you got to take this benzoyl, so that they did. Like, they listen. But it's the smaller companies. And then in Europe, they're getting it right because they have a commission, which it can't be blocked by some company. They get together, they have 17 scientists, say, this is a problem, write a paper, tell us what we need to do. Okay, we're going to do it.
And are you talking about the SCCS? Those are the reports that I refer to so
Yes.
often.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's great.
scientists aren't paid. They have no conflict of interest. There's the uh, cosmetic ingredient review in the US, which they do
CIR,
a good
yeah.
job, but they're paid.
Hmm.
They're paid by the cosmetic industry. So there's a slight contract. Like they will say, like I know two of the people on it, and they get mad when you can't say that stuff, Sandy. I go, well, don't get paid. Well, I spend time on this. Like I don't know. I think there's just a slight conflict of interest, and they take a slightly different approach.
Who are they getting paid by? Oh, sorry, go
Cosmetic,
ahead.
the cosmetic industry pays for the cosmetic ingredient review. You know, the big problem is the scientists for the cosmetic ingredient review, they do a good job, but here's the problem. What they say doesn't have to be followed by any company because it's not law.
Right.
So you would think the company would say, but the smaller companies they probably don't even know what the cosmetic ingredient review is. I don't know. So, but in Europe, it's passed as law and then the companies can't do it. I just wanted to end with essential oils. So in the EU, because these are becoming and really the problem of today in skincare because natural products are so coveted and wanted and there's so many great ones but there's a lot of not great ones so
Mhm.
if you don't have legislation you're going to get bad players so they're looking at essential oils from a hazard versus risk assessment and
Okay.
let me make sure I get this right so a hazard is something like if you're driving a car it's a hazard right? You could die, right? But the risk of the car is determined by how fast you're going, if you're tired, there's these things, right? That something can be hazardous, but if you approach it with a certain risk structure, it's not so hazardous, right? So with respect to ingredients, there are some ingredients where they look at this is where the percentage comes in. Okay, so essential oils could be hazardous, so let's control the percentage. The EU is looking at it very differently. They're going to actually they're not going to take that into account. They're just going to call them a hazard and they may actually not be able to be used.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
It's going to be very disruptive because essential oils like, what is it, Bulgarian rose is one of the most commonly used ingredients in perfumes. And it's a,
And this, as you were speaking, I was thinking about perfumes because I know that a lot of the all natural perfumes now, they're not just putting together essential oils. They're taking the components. And so maybe this could be a good thing in that they can pick and choose which
yes,
components that they're putting in there and
yeah.
not use the hazards.
Yeah, and I agree with that because the essential oil is so complex. You can take individual ones out of there, the ones that are less problematic. But a lot of the really nice scents, that thing that makes lavender smell like lavender is linalool and limonene, and that's what we like. So anyway, I don't know where that's going to go, and I haven't kept up with all the reading because, but it's coming, and they are going to change it, and there's a lot of pushback from industry. Like I think it's Hungary. It's like a $60 million industry, like this, the rose essential oil.
Well,
So
that's really interesting, and I'm gonna keep an eye out for that. Um, you know, I think it's great that the big companies are listening, and like you said, they took out the benzisothiazolinone. Why
mhm.
do you think that they're so insistent on the fragrance? Because I feel like they all have fragrance and they don't disclose what's there.
Well, actually, Procter and Gamble, you can now they have a smart label system.
Oh, I've
So
seen these, and so they will break it down. They're breaking down their
yeah,
fragrance there
yeah.
too.
They
Okay,
do. Well, I
yeah.
mean, listen, we'll finish off with this that beauty is not medicine, right? It's an industry. They're there to sell product. They have shareholders. They have profits to make. And um, even myself, although I don't like scent, I get headaches and stuff, but the vast majority of people want scent. So when I went to visit a big company in the US, I said, I get it. You got 10 flavors or scents of shampoo, cucumber and coconut and this and that. Can you just make one that's fragrance free? Just one of the 12. But we have something, like I have a nice shampoo to recommend to somebody. That's all we want. We just want options because I just said a lot of people don't have a problem. You want that option for your kids. We don't need to be bathing our kids in mango, strawberry, bubble bath, and shampoo and those balms and all that stuff. Like, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible for their skin. Horrible for little girls' vaginas, like the balms, those bath bombs. Horrendous. I don't care that they're natural. So, anyway, I'm getting a little negative Nelly here. I'm going to stop.
No, I appreciate all of this insight. This is so helpful, and I mean, it's amazing. I've enjoyed this so much. I feel like I could do, I don't know about you, but I could listen to you for definitely another hour, but I won't take up more of your time, Sandy. This has been so great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I look forward to some snippets and keep doing a good job.